The good news of Jesus. On the third day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus was also invited to the wedding with his disciples. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to his servants, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." So they took it. When the master of the feast tasted the water, now become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called to the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." This, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him.
And the second reading is from Paramahansa Yogananda. Man is the image of God, possesses within him the divine, all-accomplishing power of will. To discover through right meditation how to be in harmony with the divine will is man's, and women too, highest obligation. God is the sum total of everything. His image is within you. He can do anything. So can you. If you learn to identify yourself with his inexhaustible nature. Always be sure within the calm region of your inner self, your soul, that what you want is the right thing for you to have and in accord with God's purposes. When a host of difficulties come and you refuse to give up in spite of all the obstacles, when your mind becomes set, then you will find God responding to you. So we'll start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, remind us tonight and teach us of what it means to be in your image. Remind us that we are inseparable from the divine. Remind us that we are a spark of the divine. And teach us how to turn water into wine. Amen. So good evening. If I were to give a title to my talk tonight, it would be Sacred Magic. And sacred magic is different than personal magic. Personal magic is just the personality or the egoic personality of the person trying to create what they think they ought to have. Sacred magic is different. And sacred magic is certainly different than sorcery. So as we get into the talk, I will explain what sacred magic is. But let me start with the story of Jesus and the wedding at Cana. And you may think, well, what does the story of the wedding at Cana have to do with sacred magic? It's about marriage. It's a much bigger story, really. And as you've heard me say many times, all of these stories are really about us in some way, shape, or form. If they're not about us, if they're not about the existential circumstances of our lives, then they really have no value. But they are about us. So let me just talk about water and wine, and in this story, what they symbolize. The new wine, the wine represents the presence of the divine. It represents the Spirit. It represents the breath of God, the life of God, the love of God, the bliss of God, the joy of God, the wisdom of God. Everything that we really deeply desire is in that wine. That's what it represents in this story. What does the water represent? And just to keep it very simple, the water represents the opposite of what I just said. Think of it this way. The wine represents the joy and the bliss of the Spirit, and the water represents tears. So this is where these stories get very real. Life involves tears. Everybody in this room, in some way, shape, or form, has been touched by tragedy. We all experience moments when we are challenged to the very fiber of our being. And I'm sure we've all had moments where we're not sure if we want to get out of bed in the morning. Life involves tears. Now, the challenge for us, and this is what sacred magic is all about, is can we learn to turn the tears into new wine? Can we learn to turn the waters of our sorrow into new wine, into the wine of the Spirit? See, Jesus didn't just come to say, worship me and see how great I am. He came to reveal to us what is possible for each one of us. He never said, worship me, and I'm not saying it's bad to worship Jesus, but he never said, worship me. What he did say was, follow me. Become like me. Do the things that I have done. For example, Jesus fed 5,000 people. And he says in John's Gospel, you will do the same things I have done, even greater. Well, we know that Mother Teresa fed millions. She did what Jesus did, even bigger and greater. So, the more that we evolve spiritually, we're going to have tears come our way. That's just part of life. But we have within ourselves the potential to turn those tears into wine. I'll give you a real example from my wife's life. Some of you have heard the story. I haven't told it in years, though, but it just captures this. Many, many years ago, during February break, the kids wanted to go to Florida, like a lot of people do, or some people do anyways. And the money wasn't really there to take the kids to Florida. So you know what Vicki did? She told a white lie. She said, we're going to Florida. She drove around for about a half an hour to think that they were taking a long ride. And she went to the hotel over there on West Henrietta Road, Jefferson and West Henrietta. And if you ever go in there, they have a pool and they have all these plants and that they have a glass ceiling and the sun comes in. And Vicki told the kids that they were in Florida. Okay? And they spent 3 or 4 nights there thinking they were in Florida, swimming at the pool every day. Okay? What she did, she turned the tears of disappointment into the new wine of Florida right here in Rochester. So you see how it works? We all have the capacity to do that. And I'm going to focus now on Yogananda's words because Yogananda tells us how to do it. He tells us how to do it. So I'm going to go through line by line. The first thing that Yogananda says is that we as human beings are the very image of God, which is to say that we are like God. We are God-like. Our deepest nature is divine. See, how we get confused with it is that we have this thing called the personality. And the personality is not bad. Don't misunderstand me. And we have this soul, we have this spark of the divine within us. And it's the same spark that was in Yogananda. It's the same spark that was in Mother Teresa. It's the same spark that was in Krishna. It's in us. It's the spark of the divine. It is who we really is. I know it's bad grammar, but I'm trying to stress that. It is who we is. And then the personality, and again, the personality is not bad, but the personality gets superimposed on this divine spark, on this divinity which is us. And that's not bad because we need the personality to function in time and space and in creation. Not a bad thing. But what happens is that we mistake the personality for who we are. See, we have a personality. We are not the personality. We don't have a soul. We are the soul. We are the very image and likeness of God. But again, we have this mistaken identity, and we think that we are this personality, and the personality by its very nature is limited. The personality by its very nature isn't very effective, isn't very powerful. The personality cannot turn water into wine. Personality cannot wipe away the tears. Only the soul within us, that divine spark in union with God. So the first thing, if we're going to learn to turn water into wine, we have to remember who we are. We're not the personality. We're not our moods. We're not our thoughts. We're not our beliefs. We're not our ideologies. We're not our mistakes. We're God's image. So that's the first thing that Yogananda says. And because we are God's image, Yogananda says that we possess within us the divine, all-accomplishing power of will. Now, he's not talking about willpower. He's not talking about egoic, macho-ness. Or if you're a woman, machotness, I guess is how you would say it, okay? It's not what he's talking about. That divine spark within us is an expression of the divine will. There's a capacity within us. There's a power within us. For most of us, it's untapped. But there's a power within us to do amazing things. That's what he's talking about. Let me say it this way. I'll tell another little story. Many, many years ago, in my work as a therapist, a woman came to me, and she was very distraught because she had lost her job. Now, her first name was Maria, and her last name ended in a vowel, and she had olive-colored skin, so I assumed that she was Italian. So I said to her, "You're Italian, right?" And she said, "Yes, 100%. She said, "All 4 of my grandparents came from Italy." I said, "Did they come here with a lot of money?" "No. In fact, they came here with no money." "Did they have jobs when they came here?" "No." "Did they speak the language when they came here?" "No." I said, "But I'm willing to bet that both sets of your grandparents ended up owning their own home." She said, "Yes." "And they had some money in their pockets?" "Yes." "And one of them owned a very successful business?" So I said, those are your grandparents. She said, yes. I said, you come from them. Their blood is in your veins. She said, yes. And I said, that means if they can come to a foreign country under all of those challenges and circumstances and land on their feet, if they can turn water into wine, you can certainly survive being unemployed for a while. Their blood runs through your veins. Her eyes got real big. She said, I don't think I need to come see you anymore. Translation. God's blood runs through your veins. Again, as I said at the very beginning of the service, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings. I dare say divine beings having a human experience. God's blood runs through your veins. You're made of the divine substance. We're not limited. That's what Yogananda is saying to us. But then he gives this little caveat. He says, you discover that, you touch that through right meditation. So the way that we move from identifying with the personality is not by doing mental gymnastics. It's not by analyzing ourselves from here to kingdom come. It's by merging with, returning to our essence, and that's what meditation is. The way we teach meditation in Kriya Yoga, there's lots of secondary benefits, lower stress, all those things, but the goal is to fall back into your soul, to fall back into your essence, to realize who you are in the divine. So that's why we say the ultimate goal of meditation is surrender, to let go into God, to rediscover that purity and that innocence that is within all of us, and then to learn to live out of that purity and that innocence. And I'm going to say this, and with this I take no hostages. Without a consistent meditation practice, it is virtually impossible to discover or rediscover who you are. Then Yogananda says, identify yourself not with your limitations, but with God's inexhaustible powers and God's inexhaustible abilities. Always be sure, then Yogananda goes on to say, is always be sure in the calm regions of your soul that what you want is in accord with God's purposes. And this, again, is the really big piece. See, when Yogananda talks about God's will, he's not talking about a theological concept. He's not talking about commandments per se. God's will is literally a force. It is the love of the divine, and it is the most powerful force in all of creation. So, when Yogananda says, make sure that what you want is God's will, what he's saying is that God is this force of love that knows better than your personality knows what you need and what's best for you. God has nothing but your evolution in mind. God has nothing but your highest good in mind. And that's not just an idea, it is a literal force, it's a literal energy. And so we have to seek to be in alignment with God's will, but once we do, then God's will becomes the force, becomes the wind at our back. It becomes the energy that propels our life. And then when that is, literally nothing can stop us. And to the degree that we surrender to God's will, then that, again, that breath, that divine breath and wind becomes the wind at our back. And it's not just our willpower moving forward, it's our whole life is propelled by the will of God. That's what it means to be a spiritual person. Now, there's one important piece to qualify this. We have to make sure that every part of us is in alignment with our soul and with God. And let me just say what I mean. You know, in some ways we're complicated beings. Yes, we have this soul, but we have a mind, we have a body, we have emotions, we have imagination, we have passions, we have feelings, we have desires. And if we're really going to learn to turn water into wine, then all those parts of us have to be in alignment. So, for example, if I say, yes, God, I want to do your will. Yes, God, make me an instrument of your peace. And I really want that. But my diet is horrific. It's going to gum up the works a little bit. Or if I say I really want this, but my imagination is taking me somewhere else, it's going to gum up the works. We have to be congruent. I'll give you a couple quick examples of this. This is not a specific story, but it's a story I hear a lot. People come in to see me and they say they want to meet their life mate. They want to meet their partner. They want to meet the person they want to be married to and monogamous with the rest of their lives. And I say, good. And then they say something like, but if I meet somebody and we have a one-night stand and have a little fun, I'm going to do that too. And I'm not coming from any Catholic moral place. What I say to them, then you're never going to find your mate. Why? Because your body and your passions are not in alignment with what you say you want. And you're going to gum up the works. You're going to gum up the spiritual artery from which God's blood flows. So we have to make sure that we are in alignment, body, mind, and spirit, every part of us. And this is, what I'm about to say is literally true, that if we are in alignment, God has no choice but to join us. God has no choice but to join us in our quest. And to the degree that we are in that kind of alignment, literally creation obeys us. It cooperates with us because creation is cooperating with God. So we have to have that congruity. If we say we want something, then our whole life has to align behind it. Our money, everything has to align behind it. Then nothing can impede our spiritual evolution. Nothing. Again, creation will obey us. One last little point that Yogananda makes, and I'll move toward the closing. He says, when a host of difficulties, and if we, in doing this is not to say there isn't going to be resistance. Difficulties will come. If you set your mind, then you will find God responding to you. Difficulties are going to come. Resistances are going to come. But if we stay the course, through thick and thin, through rain, snow, sleet, and shine, good times and bad times, if we hold that soul-felt intention, again, God has no option but to respond to us. I'm going to close with a quote from Francis of Assisi that summarizes all of this. It was a prayer he wrote before the cross of San Damiano. Most high, glorious God, enlighten the darkness of my heart. Give me right faith, sure hope, and perfect charity. Fill me with understanding so that I can know what your will is. Fill me with understanding and knowledge that I may fulfill your holy command and will. Everybody in this room has the capacity. And I know a lot of your stories. You've already done it a lot of times in your life. Everybody in this room has the capacity to turn water into wine, tears into faith, into hope, into love, into joy. God has given you that capacity. And never doubt it and never neglect it. The divine in me bows before the divine in each one of you.